Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to our shed hunting webinar. And this was a pre-recorded webinar that we were out in the field one day doing some work on this and wanted to put it together to be shared down the road. We also had some tech issues with the webinar, live webinar portion, so we're reposting this in a not live portion where you can still learn the same amount, you just can't ask the questions. So we're going to go to me in the field on a shed hunting day and see what we can learn about shed hunting. So thanks for tuning in. All right, to go out shed hunting, we just need a couple of things. You don't really need all of this stuff, but to have a really good time and to be comfortable, there's little things that can really increase your comfort level and help you go further. So first off, my attire. I really want to have a good pair of boots fit for the terrain that you're in. We were in some rockier, hillier stuff today, so I really wanted to make sure I had my tough sole boot on that's about up to there. All leather, waterproof. Next thing is some pants that are pretty tough. Jeans are fine, but once they get wet, they're going to be uncomfortable. Like the old saying goes, cotton kills. But having something that can withstand walking through some tough brush is pretty important, because you're not just staying on a trail, you're going to be walking through some sage or whatever, and that stuff's going to catch and rub, and you want to have some pants that are a little tougher. And then layers. Layers are really important, especially in the hills here. We get some weather that rolls in. You want to make sure you can stay nice and warm and dry. So really like some merino wool or whatever that's a blend, and then a shell as well, to make sure that if there's a rain come by, I can make sure I can stay dry. For a pack, you got to have a pack. Unless you're going for just a little couple 100-yard hike here and there, packs, even then I would really suggest having a pack, because people have got lost doing short little hikes. So you don't need anything too terrible big. This one's just my small little day pack, but it does have hip belts. That is really, really important to have hip belts, so the weight is off of your shoulders. You do not want that on your shoulders at all. And then inside, a pack that has a water bladder. Some people like water bladders, some people just like water bottles, but that's kind of nice to have that extra water storage. But on this pack, we have a way of strapping things down. We gotta be able to take a couple of antlers and just buckle them down. Because if you don't have a way to strap these down at all, you're definitely not going to have much room to hold on to them. Your hands will get full, and it's really comfortable to be able to strap these to your back, especially on a long hike. Otherwise your hands are full for quite some time and you're carrying them, and it's just awkward and not comfortable. So I really want to make sure you got something to be able to strap. This is my pack for shed hunting for deer or short hikes, that sort of thing. Now if I'm going to do a much longer hike, I do want my big backpack. If I'm going for elk, because if I find a bunch of elk, this has got a lot of room to strap a lot of antlers to it, and 6 antlers would be a really, really great day of shed hunting, but 6 antlers on this pack just almost isn't going to fit. And you really, really don't want to have to leave anything behind. So that's a really nice thing to have a bigger pack, maybe some more comfortable hip belt padding and everything. So that's really nice. Or a frame pack. There's a lot of options for that. Going down the line, back to our binoculars and our harness. A smaller set of 8x42 or 10x42 are great for the hills area, just looking out 20 to 100 yards. Bigger binoculars work great for being able to see across canyons, and it seems kind of weird that you'd be using binoculars to shed hunt, but you'd be surprised at what you can pick up having binoculars. So they are a must for shed hunting. I know a lot of guys that find more antlers with these than they do just stumbling upon them. So these are really important to have. Also real close to me, one of the most important things, chapstick. This time of year, it just seems like everything's dry and your lips get chapped easy. So I've got to have some chapstick, a knife. For what, I don't know, but you always got to have a knife. There's always a reason to have a knife. Also, this goes along with my attire. This time of year, it's really nice to have a set of gaiters to go around your boots. Kind of keeps things and these strap on. It's really nice there to keep your pant legs from getting all torn up. Also, if you get into some deeper snow or even a little creek crossing, it's going to keep your feet dry. Another important thing with your feet is having layered socks. I really like wearing a wool sock and then underneath a polypropylene liner. That way you have sock rubbing on sock instead of sock rubbing on your foot. And that way you're gonna go quite a bit further and without as many blisters and that sort of thing. Next, down the line, we got our emergency stuff. Even on a short little hike, we need to be prepared for whatever could happen. You never know if you get hurt, twist an ankle, and have to spend the night in the woods. So always a flashlight. This is my little emergency pack. Pretty small, pretty lightweight, but it's got a lot of stuff in here that is gonna save my behind if I'm in trouble. I've got a little thing of my blister treatment. There's a variety of things out here. My wife's an athletic trainer, so she's got me these sweet little gel pad things with some KT tape to stick on there. Works really good. Duct tape works well also. Athletic tape is great for just about anything. And then some duct tape for some patch repair, whatever. You can do a lot with duct tape. In here, I've got multiple ways of starting a fire. I've got multiple ways of signaling, and I have multiple ways of help with a shelter. So for my fire, I will have matches. I will have more than one Bic lighter because they're lightweight and really important. A magnesium strip, and then did I say regular old matches? Matches, a lighter, and a magnesium strip. There's 3 ways. Got to be nice and redundant. And then a couple of ways of starting a fire. So I've got some pyro putty here, some good fire starter, as well as some other little Vaseline covered cotton balls and some variety of fire starters that you can have. Right now it'd be probably pretty easy to start a fire, but a little moisture could make that really hard. Then of course our regular old first aid kit, some band-aids of various kinds, some saline wipes or things to wipe a cut, and then some gauze to make sure you can stop some major bleeding if you had to. Extra batteries for my flashlight or whatever I have running on some battery power. There's some Benadryl for you never know if somebody gets an allergic reaction, some ibuprofen, even down to just a little allergy tablet of some sort. Start feeling kind of sick because all the pollen in the air. Ibuprofen is really important to have. So there's my little quick emergency first aid kit. Trying to make sure I have enough of everything to make sure I can stay in the woods at night if I had to. Another really great thing, since I have mapping software on our phones, and a lot of us do, we use our phones non-stop during that. So one of the phone chargers is really, really nice to have so that you can have multiple charges. And who knows, if your phone's dying, you need to make one last call for emergency, you've got it. So the next big thing, like I said, was mapping software. There's all kinds of apps out there that can help figure out how far you've gone, mark waypoints, and to judge distance and know the terrain and make sure you don't get lost. That's a really important thing also. And there was a compass in here as well if I need to, and then a map of the area. Nice to have those. It doesn't weigh much. It goes in the bottom of the pack. I don't use it very often at all, but if I had to, I'd be really glad it's there. Next, some food. It's past lunchtime, so I've eaten most of my food, but food and snacks, especially if you're taking kids, that's a really, really important thing to have. Lots of good snacks. And I think that's we'll go through that in another video. If you got multiple people, some radios would be really good to stay in touch because you kind of spread out, could lose track of each other. So make sure you have some radios and stay in touch. Katie's got our tripod right now, but if you were to be glassing over some major canyons, it'd be nice to have a tripod, a little seat to sit on, and your binoculars to mount on top of those. That's a really handy way to sit and be able to look through your binoculars quite a bit longer. I got a little rope for tying antlers on, or again, another shelter building piece along with my reflective blanket in there that you could have as an emergency. You never go into the woods without a little teepee. That's important. Water bottle with a little extra water, and then there's lots of products out there too to help give you a little extra pick-me-up that's nice to mix with your water, give you a little flavor different than water, because it's hard to stay hydrated sometimes when you're out hiking. Also, if you're shed hunting in the hills, we had a little snowstorm just the other day, and we got a few inches, and there's still going to be some snow in other spots. Some of the best shed hunting could actually have some snow, so pack some snowshoes, and you never know if you're going to need them or not. Another couple little things to add in there would be a pair of gloves, another thick layer of clothes, and one thing I don't have here that is really, really nice to have is trekking poles. Trekking poles help you go a lot further, even if you're a young, good, in-shape hiker. They're going to allow you to take a few pounds off of each step, and a few pounds are going to add up in a nice 10-15 mile hike. So you're going to be able to go a lot further and hopefully find some more antlers. So again, there's a lot of gear here that's not necessarily important, but it's nice to have.
Hey guys, my name's Officer Decker. I'm a wildlife conservation officer for the state of South Dakota with South Dakota Department of Game Fish and Parks. Today, we're going to talk about shed hunting. Now, shed hunting is a very popular springtime activity. People are getting out, weather's starting to warm up a little bit, and they're out there looking for antlers that are dropped by our cervid species. So in South Dakota, you're going to be looking for whitetail, mule deer, or elk sheds. So we're going to talk about some of the legalities of shed hunting today, and we're going to dive right in. So when I talk shed hunting, we're talking about naturally shed antlers. So if you look at this one right here, you see this little button on the top? This one was a naturally shed antler, dropped off. In the wintertime, these drop off. They're no longer putting nutrients into these. They're going to be laying out there around feed grounds, fence crossings, creek crossings, anywhere where they're congregating or they may be jumping. But this is what we're going to be looking for right here. Now, an important thing to remember is that we're only talking about naturally shed antlers. A lot of questions I get when it comes springtime and people are out shed hunting, I came across a deadhead. This is a deadhead right here. This is an animal that died. The horns are still affixed to the skull. Can I pick this up and collect it? Unfortunately, you can't. So in South Dakota, it's against the law to pick up a deadhead like this. If you see it, you just gotta leave it lay, let nature take its course. You might also find something like this, where it's not a naturally shed antler. It's one where the skull's been broken over time. It's been laying out there. This one especially, you can tell, has been there for a while. It's chalky. It's starting to break down. But you can see that part of the skull is still affixed to the antler. Again, you couldn't pick this one up. It's not a naturally shed antler. Why is it that way? We have a law like this because there's no way to show legal possession of a deadhead. Why can't you pick up a deadhead? We've had incidences in the past where individuals have gone out and have killed multiple deer during rifle or archery season with the sole purpose of coming back in the springtime, picking up a deadhead and claiming that it was just a deer that naturally died. So we've made cases like that where people have gone out and they have been poaching resources from you, the avid outdoorsman or outdoorswoman that is out there trying to do things the right way. So again, there's no legal means of showing possession of a deadhead. So again, you can only collect naturally shed antlers. If you come across a big elk when you're out there shed hunting that's a deadhead, let us know about it. We do take those and we do use them for school programs. We do use them for display items at our outdoor campuses or other offices. So some of that stuff won't go to waste, but unfortunately we can't allow you to keep it. While you're out there shed hunting, you might also find a dead bighorn sheep. Now, our bighorn sheep, our mountain goats, those are trophy animals. It doesn't matter if it's a ewe or if it's the next Boone and Crockett ram. Those are trophy animals, and you cannot, under any circumstance, keep those. If you do find them, let us know. We do go out and collect those ram skulls and those ewe skulls because we do need to take data off of them because we do keep a close monitor on our bighorn and mountain goat populations. So in South Dakota, there are no laws that tell you when you can and cannot shed hunt. So if you are out in the fall and you come across a shed, by all means you can pick it up. If you happen to be mountain lion hunting or snowshoeing or hiking in the wintertime and you come across a shed, by all means you can pick it up. We do encourage people to be smart about their shed hunting. We don't want you going into the elk wintering grounds and pushing the herd out just to look for sheds, causing them undue stress. So again, there's some ethics that Clint's going to talk about on when you should and shouldn't, but we don't have any laws in place. Now, are there areas you can't shed hunt? Yes. Badlands National Park, Mount Rushmore National Monument, any of the national parks, national monument areas, you cannot shed hunt within. In our state parks, we do not want you shed hunting inside our state parks unless they explicitly allow it. Again, those areas we want to remain as natural as possible. And so again, pulling those sheds, pulling those resources out of there takes away from the natural side of that environment. Now, Black Hills National Forest, go hog wild. Go find them sheds, have fun, hike, take the kids, take the dogs, take the family, take your best friend, go by yourself, whatever. Go out there, find some sheds, enjoy it. But again, make sure that if you have an area you are unsure of, call us. That way we can tell you, yes, you can shed hunt there, no, you can't shed hunt there. When in doubt, ask some questions. We're always here to answer questions. You can always call us at the outdoor campus. They'll get you in touch with one of our law enforcement officers that can give you the answers that you need. You can shed hunt on Black Hills National Forest, Buffalo Gap National Grasslands, Fort Pierre National Grasslands. You can shed hunt on our game production areas now. Walk-in areas you cannot. That's an important one. So walk-in areas you cannot shed hunt on. Those are private property. You would have to have landowner permission to shed hunt on a walk-in area. Just like you cannot trap on a walk-in area, we lease only the hunting privileges for the public on our walk-in areas. We don't lease any of the shed hunting or trapping or fishing privileges. Those are different contracts, and we would have different markings on those properties if you can do certain things there.
Today we're out here doing a little shed hunting, and shed hunting is a great activity to do in the late winter, early spring where the weather's nice. It is February or March today, and I'm in almost a t-shirt. We're gonna have 50-degree weather, so a great thing to do to get outside, burn off some of that winter fat, and maybe do a little scouting for turkey, just get a little exercise, and basically have the best Easter egg hunt you've ever had by going and looking for some sheds on the ground. So the first thing we're gonna do is find a piece of ground, and we found this little piece at some public ground along a river, and we've got some thick trees along both sides. There's some cedars as well as a bunch of tall cottonwoods. And so what we'll do then is kind of spread out like we're turkey or pheasant hunting and keep our eyes on the ground, trying to find where those sheds are. You can walk right past them. I've even stepped on them before without even realizing they're there. So we really got to try and keep our eyes out for little tines up, tines down, something like that that looks a little unnatural. Earlier in the season, I had been hunting this area, had seen some deer, but also found the cover, which I realized would be a really good spot for the deer to winter in. One thing we found is that on the side we were on did not have as much of the cedars in it as did the other side. We had brought waders to do a river crossing, but didn't feel like it was the safest thing to do at that time. So again, scouting is one of those things that's pretty important in trying to find any sort of sheds and knowing that there is deer in that area at that time. Another issue we ran into is we ran into some other boot tracks. We were probably not the first ones in this area, therefore any other antlers may have been picked up, but it doesn't mean it's not worth checking again. One of the things we want to do while we're looking is not just spread out, but also walk kind of slow. If you're walking too fast, you're going to walk right by them, but also look to see where the deer are going. And so you can see there's a trail here, maybe a cattle trail, but I'm sure the deer use it as well. So this is an area that I would think the deer could be traveling. So we're going to kind of move along this travel corridor and see if they're not down in this river bottom. Okay, let's go find some. Along with travel corridors and trails, bedding areas and feeding areas are your top areas to be hitting. We did run into some deer on the way in on a big flat. And yes, I'm sure there's antlers out in that area, but it would take a day to cover that entire flat area for maybe an antler or two. So really have to focus on how to utilize as much of your day and time to try and cover the best ground possible. Where can we find them? And I guess you could say, where the deer at? And try and find where the deer are at this time of year is what's going to guide you to where these antlers are. Now we could go out on the prairie, the rolling prairie where there's not a whole lot of cover, and you're going to find antlers out there. But you're probably going to have to cover a lot of ground. So for just one day of shed hunting to try and find an antler, we tried to narrow it down to where these deer are at the most. And with the cold weather that we had, probably about the time some of these deer were shedding, we're gonna go where the cover is, because they may have been down in these trees, staying out of the wind, out of the cold, out of the snow. So this is probably one of those areas that could hold some antlers without covering too terrible much ground. Now the time of the year when these antlers are going to be dropping varies quite a bit. In the hills, you're going to see whitetails starting to drop as early as Christmas time, and that's pretty early. But once you hit January, February, a lot of those antlers are going to start to drop, and by March, most of them, if not all, are going to be dropped. Maybe a few little smaller bucks will hold on to their antlers a little longer. With the elk in the hills, that's a little different. They hold on a little longer. We'll hit that when we hit the hills part. And then with out on the prairie, we're going to have whitetail and mule deer out here hold on to their antlers just a touch longer than they do in the hills. So probably right around January, February, March, you're going to see a lot of the whitetails here drop. Mule deer are going to hold on to them just a touch longer. They literally could drop at any point while they're in their bed, or if they're up on in the prairie feeding. So looking at some of that thick cover, the cedars, where they may be going through and an antler catches and it falls off, that could be a good spot. Or where they jump a fence and they've rattled that antler loose just a little bit. If it was about to fall off, that might be a spot. Or going down into a depression of some sort, they might step harder as they're walking, so that could be a good spot to find an antler. In this scenario where we have the river bottom, I'm really focused on around these trees, the cottonwoods. I don't have the highest hopes, but I'm hoping once we get a little thicker into some cedars, that could be pretty good. All right, the weather actually does have something to do with shed hunting. One, it's really nice, and it's not raining, snowing, and we've got the ground mostly clear snow, so that is a factor. I've heard various things as far as sunny days versus shady days, and it kind of depends on where you're at in the country and what type of shed hunting you're doing. Sometimes that sun really hits an antler, like that whitetail we just put right there. The sun hits that and really makes that antler pop out. Versus this one right over here, which you may not even be able to see from the camera, which is just fine. It's in a shadow. So some of those really cloudy days where there's not as many shadows can actually make things a little nicer. I've heard like a nice rainy day is actually not a bad day to shed hunt, versus other people are gonna say a nice sunny day is gonna make some of these antlers pop out. So there's some various things that you're gonna notice as far as that sun hitting the antler versus not. Another thing we're gonna see is this antler is tines down. So it's sitting down like that. So it's pretty easy to walk by, versus this one right up here. The tines are almost up, sticking out just a little bit more. And what we're looking for is just that unnatural smoothness of an antler. We see that this is not something you would see in nature as a nice, smooth, straight edge. Yeah, there's a lot of sticks out there that look like antlers, but this one for sure just catches your eye as something that is just a little different. So that's what we're doing out here today, is trying to find an antler that's just trying to find that odd shape, that different shape, or see if the sun can't hit that and shine. Down in the prairie, you're gonna see a lot of really white antlers. In these cedars, they may be a little darker colored. In the hills, you're gonna have some nice dark colored antlers, so maybe those are a little harder to find. Who knows? Just depends on where it's sitting and where the antler was dropped. Right off of these river bottoms is plenty of little draws with all kinds of cedars and other cover, so these are good to check out as well, and wouldn't really take much time to look at them. All right, so we're starting our hike here in the Black Hills. We don't know if this is going to be a good spot or not, but it seemed like a spot. And if we find some, great. If we don't, no big deal. First off, we did was pulled up our mapping software, marked the location of the truck so we know we can get back to it. That's important because oftentimes you're looking down the ground, weaving back and forth, and you can get turned around pretty easy. So marked where I was at, dropped the waypoint, and then kind of looked and figured out a route, which way we're gonna go. Make a big loop all the way around, utilizing that entire hike to try and find some sheds. And then we can see some deer sign here. That's a good sign that we're in an area. As long as there's tracks, there's potential to be some antlers hanging out here. So find some tracks, try to find some droppings that are relatively fresh within the last month or whenever they were dropping. That's pretty important to see if we can't find them. So we'll get started hiking and see if we can't find one. As we are shed hunting here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, one of the major things we're going to find, most common things, is going to be a whitetail deer antler. And we can tell those are whitetail mainly by the main beam of the shape of that, with tines coming up. Most likely a whitetail is going to have a brow tine. That's that first point right there. So you are going to find some whitetail antler that may look like a mule deer or be a little less pronounced. I don't have any good examples of that right now, but these are mostly going to be like a hills white-tailed deer. You're also going to notice that some of the deer in the hills here do not get quite as big as what you'll find out on the prairie or in the agricultural grounds across the state. So that's just kind of notorious about our white-tailed deer in the hills. They're smaller. Doesn't mean they're any younger, or they just don't get as big. It's totally different genetics. So white-tailed deer, these are very fresh antlers picked up within probably the first few months of them dropping, because we don't notice any damage to it. Got a touch of damage on the end of this one from a squirrel, but it's also got all of its color, nice and brown, nice and shiny. The burr on that's pretty sharp yet. So this was a fresh pickup. The longer it sits out in the sun, the UV rays really break it down and deteriorate it. So, or this one got attacked by a squirrel. So there's little squirrel marks on there, chewed. And in the hills, you got to pick them up soon, or the squirrels will get them. And that just makes them not look quite as cool. And also, you wouldn't want to use them maybe for an art project of some sort. The other deer you're going to find in the hills are mule deer. Just shaped a little differently. This one doesn't have a brow tine, and some mule deer do have brow tines, some don't. Oftentimes you're going to see that antler branch off. The typical mule deer has a branch there, branch there, branch there, branch there. And so there's would be a pretty decent mule deer buck for the Black Hills. Some of the cool things about finding some different antlers in the hills is you got some really unique characteristics that you can find. Like this one has a hole right through the middle of that point. This one's nice and massive and has a cool little what we'd call the G2 right there, a little bladed tine. Other ones you're going to find, this one actually is just a little wider, and I think he sat out just a little bit longer, or he had rubbed his antlers on something just a little bit different. In the hills here, we're going to see antlers that might be a touch darker because they're getting some of the pine sap on them, and it makes those just a little darker. Out in the prairie, they might be a touch whiter. After that antler sat there a little bit longer, you're going to see some major deterioration. You might even notice it weighs a little less. So it's lighter, a few more chews on it, and even some pink. That pink is there from the sun, the UV rays just really deteriorating it. And then it starts to get cracks throughout the antler. Probably going to start with the side that's being exposed to the sun is going to get more cracks than the underside. And then after it's been there maybe a year or two, you're really going to start to see major cracks. It's not as smooth and soft. Like this one's already starting to deteriorate right there. Some different animals have come along and chewed on it and really broken that down. So this one's probably been there a couple, 2-3 years. It all depends on what side of the hill it's sitting on, how much sun exposure it has, if it's getting some water damage to it. All of those things are going to contribute to the deterioration of the antler. Then the pesky squirrels will come in and do things like this. But it's really good for the squirrels because they're wanting to chew on this, get all the nutrients from the middle of that antler and eating that marrow that's in the middle. Just like your dog chewing on an antler, he's getting all the good nutrients from it. That squirrel's doing the same thing. So he's chewing that up. So good for the squirrel, not so good for the shed hunter. And after 3, 4, 5, 6 years, depending on where it's sitting, you're really deteriorating down to a bunch of just chalky antler that could maybe break in half by just hitting it over something. So you can see some of the wear and tear. You really want to try and pick them up nice and early before they get to looking like this. It'd be fun to have some of these to decorate with, used for various projects throughout the house. But there is some things that we got to think about ethics-wise while we're shed hunting, is make sure we're not pushing animals. This is the time of year when these animals are in their weakest state. They have gone through all winter, they've gone through a breeding season, and they're tired, they're exhausted. The food sources are not as readily available and not in the highest nutrients as they were in the springtime. So they're weak, and by pushing them around, we can create that animal some unnecessary stress. So if you're hiking around and see some elk, see some deer, try not to push them any more than you would any other time of the year. So you want to try and avoid that. Don't cause any unnecessary stress. Some cool things to do with antlers is to decorate with them. There's lots of things that you can build. You've seen all kinds of things like lamps and some more in-depth projects. I've seen people making pens and salt shakers and all kinds of different things out of them. Rings, earrings, jewelry of some sort. There's lots of things in that way. You could cut them up for your dog to chew on them. You could hang them on, make a coat hanger out of all these different things or whatever, or just make a nice stack of antlers in the corner. There's a variety of different things that you can do to really spruce up your house, make it look like a true Black Hills home, and have a little memory of maybe your kid's first shed that he picked up, or you and your wife had a great time out shed hunting and you found this one and it was the only one you found. So some great memories, just like when you're going out hunting and you put a shoulder mount on the wall. It's something to bring home and to remember the memory and the trip that you had and relive that memory. One of the cool things about shed hunting is that you're one of the first people out here after the winter months, and there's a lot of things that are undisturbed and a lot of activity that's happened in the woods that hasn't been discovered yet. So it's one of the cool things we found today. We've already found otter tracks over by the river, and then today, just a second ago, we found some mountain lion scat. We can tell that is mountain lion scat because it's got a lot of hair in it, and it's too big for a coyote. So it's obviously mountain lion, which is pretty cool. It's just 100 yards from the highway, where a cat was right here. And we all know that there's a lot of mountain lions in the Black Hills, but cool to see a little bit of sign from them. Just like we were saying with the mountain lion scat, we found that, and then look up and here's a lion kill. It's pretty old, but the poor little fawn didn't make it, but the lion got what it needed. So we can tell just jaw size that there was a little fawn that was caught here, eaten, and that lion probably ate on this for a little bit, went to the bathroom over there, hung out here for just a little bit, and probably moved on to the next one. So it's pretty cool to see all the sign of the different animal and try to put together what the story was that happened here. So pretty neat to see. All right, along with finding this lion kill, this was for sure a fawn or a young deer, and this one didn't have any antlers to it, but if it had a skull, and I guess we haven't found the antler or found the skull to it, so it's probably around here somewhere. But if it had any antlers to it, like we said in the law enforcement section of this, that we would need to leave it there. We cannot keep dead heads. That is a perfect example of a dead head. Maybe it died naturally. This one died from predation, so we would need to leave it here. That would not be a legal thing for us to take. All right, one little secret to finding sheds in the hills is looking for areas where the pines were thinned, and when these come down on the ground, deer will come munch on these pine needles, and there can be some antlers sitting in some of these brush piles. Even if you're not finding any antlers like we aren't, there's one thing you can do to really help our public lands out here. And so is because there's so many people that recreate on these pieces of property, you're going to see cans and garbage all over. So if you could, you see some garbage, pick it up, and you're doing some good for our public lands, cleaning it up, making it a little nicer. As you can see, there's snow here, no snow over there. So kind of depending on how the winter is, if we had this kind of snow and a lot more, come springtime, we know that that side is probably what we would want to be shed hunting a little bit more. Deer wouldn't want to be in 2-3 foot of snow over here when they've got a foot or less over there, or burned off, where they can actually reach the feed. So kind of knowing those, what the winter brings, and maybe on that south side slope could bring maybe a few more antlers. Another great opportunity while you're out here is maybe carry your rifle and your mountain lion tag. Be a good opportunity to get out and cover some ground, and you never know if you run into a mountain lion track that you might need to follow and have a good opportunity there. So a couple reasons to get out and enjoy the outdoors, learn some new ground that could better suit you for hunting season. Hunting season is pretty short compared to the rest of the year, so might as well get out as much as you can, try and learn new ground and find where those deer are. Mountain lions aren't the only predator in the woods, and a mountain lion would have no problem killing a coyote. So lots of fresh kills all over these places. One thing you really got to be careful of wandering around the hills here is that you can get turned around very easily. We've already kind of gone up and down a few little ridges and really aren't that far from the truck. Less than a mile, less than half a mile. And really want to be careful here, making sure we know exactly which way we're headed, using your mapping software, a GPS, and having a backup just in case those die is really, really important. Or even having a general idea, I know a road is there and the road is there. Having that in the back of my mind knows that and where those are at all times. I'm constantly looking at my map so that if something happens, I can get right to a roadway and then back to the truck. So really be careful, and maybe don't go alone. Go with someone that's familiar with the area and make sure you're comfortable before going out hiking throughout the hills. There are also a few certain things you got to be careful of out here is some mine shafts. There's a lot of mining that's happened in the hills, as we all know, and there are some big old drop-off mine shafts we got to be careful of. If mountain lions make you nervous, a sidearm isn't a bad idea, but it's not something that is necessary by any means. So we've got other videos around approaching or having to live with mountain lions and just making yourself big, talking to it, scared away. Make sure you know it knows that you're a human, not a snack. One little spot we came to was a nice open meadow where I would think some deer would be hanging out. Here's one of them mine shafts you got to be kind of careful of. This one's not too deep, so it's not that big of a deal. But definitely wouldn't want to be hiking at night. Fall down in there, not see it. Sprain an ankle or something like that. So got to be careful of those because they can get deeper. Today's a really good day to be shed hunting because we just had a snow that grabbed all this snow or the grass and sucked it down to the ground. So it's nice and matted, but yet it's all warm enough. It melted very quickly, and that allows those antler tines to stick right up and be able to see them. We're not able to see them because we can't find any yet, but this would be a good scenario where you would find them. Well, we went out and hiked a couple of miles, which wasn't enough for today because we didn't find any. And really all it is a matter of hiking around, cover enough ground, and trying to find those little pockets of antlers. We could have walked right by some, we don't know. We could have just missed them. There could be a little pocket just off of here. And really what I mean by pockets is when you find one, there's a good chance there's another one around. Oftentimes a lot of deer and elk like to hang out in bachelor herds this time of year, so you're gonna find, when you find one, work your way around and try and keep looking in that same area. And that's what we were going to do if we found one, is just work that area for quite a while, trying to make sure we picked up everything we could find in that area. So we honestly didn't hike too terrible much today. And if we had, I bet if we put another 5 miles in, we'd be coming up with something.
Did you plant those?
No.
They're literally right there.
Yeah. Don't pick them up yet. And we did get lucky. Came up on a little set, actually just laying just like this. Laying one on top of each other. He lost them at the exact same time. Just kind of cool to see. Doesn't happen all that often. And already, a mouse has chewed into it. Katie's upset she didn't find any.
What?
Nothing. But just like we said, we found a set. Now we're checking out the area, trying to see if we can't find it. Really kind of makes sense. We're in a little bit of a nice little draw right here. They were laying right in there. So it's in his travel corridor. And that concludes our infield portion of our shed hunt video. We didn't really find what we were looking for in the prairie, so we had to be adaptable, and that's the one thing you have to do as a shed hunter. Not finding what you're looking for, it's not the right ground, don't waste your energy, and get out of there, go to the next spot. Next thing we notice is in the hills too, deer densities are different. So you're gonna notice a lot higher density of deer per square mile in the hills, which could provide for greater opportunity. But if you got in some private land out in the prairie, you might have some higher quality of deer, some really good stuff out in the prairie. Also didn't touch much on elk. Elk are a different type of sheds to be looking for, much bigger, but also going to be shedding in little groups, where if you find one antler, you're going to probably find another one. One of the big things with elk as well as deer is that if you check on the south and west facing slopes where that snow gets burnt off the first time and they're looking for good feed, that's a really good spot to check out. Some of the questions we had were, do you always find them in pairs? And the answer is no. More often than not, I find singles. It's a bonus to find one sitting next to each other. Another question we had was on private land. Do those regulations still exist? And yes, they do. You can't pick up deadheads. All the same rules apply. You need to also make sure you have permission on those private lands. So that concludes our webinar on shed hunting. Tune into our next one that we have. Make sure you're paying attention to our Facebook page, and soon to be some big updates on our website. So pay attention to those. We'll make sure we bring you more content. Thanks for tuning in.